And then I think you can see the way the paragraph would run. I would just have examples of his dedication. That's it. One of my favorite words from high school English when I was in your place, juxtaposition. It's a word that we're going to study just very briefly. You'll get a little taste of it. You'll probably study it more, especially when you study poetry formally, which you won't do in sophomore year, with the exception of Shakespearean verse, but that's a different animal. Juxtaposition, and the verb is juxtapose, an equally cool word. Juxtaposition is when you place two or more elements or things or subjects next to each other for a specific purpose. You just place them next to each other. Let me do a little poetry example. What if I place two words next to each other without saying anything else? So I'll place these two words. The two words are grandmother and raisin. First reaction is laughter, right? Okay, I just gained a reaction, laughter. Secondly, what other reaction did I gain in your mind? What did I elicit? Nora? How so? No, you're right. I just evoked an image. The word grandmother does not by itself evoke in all of you an image of somebody who is extraordinarily wrinkled. Because different people have different grandmothers with different skin. So, if I want to force that, I'll place these two words together, grandmother and raisin. I don't even have to say anything else. The placement together is what creates that meaning. So, that's simple. How about something more complex? Dreaming of Heroes juxtaposes two different stories. Does anybody remember what those two stories are? They're told back to back. And specifically, what about those two boys?
Their relationships with their father.
Thank you. Bissinger does not give you any conclusions about how to compare or contrast these two stories. All he does is tell them right next to each other. So you read about Mike Winchell's relationship with his father, and then you read about Don Billingsley's relationship with his father. What can you conclude? Is one bad, the other good? Is one relationship helpful for the boy, other relationship harmful? I don't know. And he doesn't necessarily know either. He juxtaposes those two together to get you to think about relationships with fathers and how they affect these boys. And you should also be thinking about Boobie Miles and the abuse that he's had, and LV as a surrogate father. And your mind should be making connections. Juxtaposition. Formal or informal voice. The personal approach of the author to the listener. So, am I really formal with you? Do I use complete sentences? Do I eliminate slang from my language? Do I eliminate contractions from my language? Do I attempt to enunciate every single word? Obviously, I was just doing that in everything that I was speaking to show that there is a formal tone of voice as well as just formal language selection. But you're talking about, in writing, the selection of words to be formal. And we saw that, does anybody remember where we saw somebody dropping into an informal voice to create a connection with the reader in those selections? Gretchen?
There's a selection where they talk about cold schooling. You use the word kid,
Mm-hmm.
which is an informal
That's right.
way of describing children.
And I noticed later that on the next line there was the word hip, which is another example of slang. So she uses slang throughout that, and she uses contractions to create an informal voice. What's the effect? Which of the three? Yeah.
You can measure maybe.
Therefore, which of the three? Logos, ethos, or pathos?
Ethos.
Correct. We're creating an identity in the writer that writer is one of us. Not an alienated intellectual, but a real human being with real concerns that we can relate to. Thus, we trust that person more. Now we get into the diction areas, the word choice areas, but I want to specify them. anybody know what jargon means? Anybody heard this word before? You might have heard it, but you're not quite sure what it means. Jargon refers to any language that is specific to a technical area of expertise. Every area of expertise has its own words, its own vocabulary, its own language. Literary analysis does. You're learning 3 of them: pathos, logos, ethos. You just learned juxtaposition. These are technical terms for language studies. Biology, osmosis, osmotic reactions. Throw out some more. Biology. Technical bioterms that you don't hear anywhere else. Homeostasis, nice. Osmosis, I just said it. It's a good one, though. It's one of my favorites. One of the only ones that I remember. There was always a myth that we could somehow put a textbook on our head, pour some water over it, and through osmosis we would absorb the information. But it never worked. Gretchen already expressed a problem with jargon when we were first talking about Friday Night Lights, because she said that she didn't understand football jargon and thus was a bit alienated from the discussion going on in Friday Night Lights. Not understanding what the word down means in reference to football rules is an issue with jargon. That's a word technical to football. You might not see that because you think, oh, everybody knows down. You don't see it until you find out somebody who doesn't know American football. Gretchen, don't feel bad. I'm sure that the majority of the world's population has absolutely no clue what down means in that context. Also, the majority of the world's population thinks something entirely different when you say football. So, don't worry. You're fine. Slang, you know what that is. Both jargon and slang invite the listener to be part of a specific group. They say, hey, I'm part of this group or this community. Join me in talking about football. Join me in talking about literature. That's what we do in this room on a regular basis. Join me in talking about biology. Or join me in being a 15-year-old social networker. I'm sure there's a heck of a lot of slang that you folks use from those discussions that would alienate certain readers and invite others in. Yeah, don't start going off on it, please. You heard enough. Last one as we draw close to the end. Loaded language. Loaded language is slightly different. This is just language which sparks the emotional response through its connotation. Can cross over with imagery, can cross over with slang. So there is overlap in these sections, by the way. But as we saw in the black and white example, the use of the N-word was loaded language. Profanity can be seen as both slang and loaded language, depending upon what you're looking for in the effect. So, here's irony. The young man who just walked by the hall very loudly, disrupting my class and my train of thought, also wrote a fantastic paper last year on Bissinger's use of profanity to shock an audience. Loaded language. You'll have time to work on this in class, especially on Friday. Bring your graded writing tomorrow.